When I watch Sleeping Beauty, it feels as though there's no one who can match the might and magic of the dark fairy Maleficent. And while I do like to believe she is one of the most powerful villains to have ever existed, there are certain clues that suggest maybe all of her strength doesn't derive from her, but a master who she calls upon. That master is who we are attempting to identify today. Hello, I'm Isaac from Watso Videos, where we discuss fun topics for fun people. I'm focused on spreading magic by examining Disney, so if you are new here, consider following my adventures on Instagram and subscribing. I'd also like to tell you, before we dive into the darkness of Maleficent and her possible master, that I have exciting news to share with all of you. Throughout my time on YouTube, I have been able to achieve my dreams, as I have been able to create a job for myself that allows me to focus on Disney every single day. And I came to realize that I'm not alone. There are people from all walks of life who were able to work hard on what they care about and who were able to make their dreams become real. And what I find fascinating is that each one of these people has ventured on a different path to get where they are. To uncover how people are achieving their dreams by following their passions, I began a podcast called Following Dreams. The podcast is currently on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher, along with a whole bunch of other places that are all linked below. And in the first episode, I interview Seamus Gorman on how he built a career loving Toy Story. It'd mean a lot if you went and checked out the new show, and if you let me know what you think. I'm really excited to begin making this completely different type of content, and I hope you enjoy it as well. And just so you know, YouTube will continue to function as normal. Videos will keep coming. But of course, before you go listen to how you can follow your own dreams on my podcast Following Dreams, let's talk about one of the darkest individuals who is consistently ready to crush dreams.
You poor simple fools, thinking you could defeat me, the mistress of all evil.
Now, while I know some fun people may not believe that Maleficent has someone guiding her, since she is a woman in a position of authority and control over the profoundly immoral and wicked, there are hints she's obedient to some greater force. She may be so heinous and cruel that even the fairies, who can literally only do good and provide happiness, can't see any glimmer of hope within the Dark Fairy, but there are limitations to what she can do on her own.
Well, she can't be all bad.
Oh, yes, she can.
While Maleficent may be able to curse others, summon a forest of thorns, and transform into a dragon, making her seem impossible to stop, she is restricted by what she can understand and the magic that she can perform. She doesn't know anything about love or kindness or the joy of helping others, which meant she was absolutely blinded by her evil and left her unable to find Aurora for almost 16 years. In addition, at times, she cannot alter the magic of the good fairies, as we saw when her precious pet Diablo was turned to stone. And she remains a mortal being, who we are able to see is only able to be revived in the storybook Maleficent's Revenge with the assistance of another. Maleficent's magic is intimidating, terrifying, and dominant, but she is not all-powerful, and by the way she talks about evil, it may be the case that she doesn't even derive all of her magic from herself. For instance, Maleficent speaks about the tyrannical forces of evil as if they are some living entity.
Oh, they're hopeless. A disgrace to the forces of evil.
While she could be discussing evil in a metaphorical sense, I find this unlikely from what she states when she becomes the horrible yet extremely iconic dragon. Maleficent explains where the strength of her enchantment came from.
Now shall you deal with me, O prince, and all the powers of hell!
As an entity who lived and died within the world and was not all-powerful or all-knowing, then it's unlikely that she was the one who ruled over the powers of hell. Instead, Maleficent transforms into a dragon because she unleashes all the power that she is able to channel from this darker power than herself. The strength from the realm of hell gave her the capability to become a monster. I would like to think Maleficent is one of the most powerful evil users that has ever existed, as I said before, but it seems that her grandest power derives from another world. To receive magic such as this from a place as dangerous and mighty as hell itself, I think Maleficent would have had to bend the knee to another. I think Maleficent would have had to have become the servant of a master and be guided by the ruler of hell itself. But of course, who was this being? Well, initially the reason this idea came to mind was because of a previous video I did a while ago on how the evil queen from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs received her magic. This video will be linked below if you are interested in it. As I looked back at how I went through the steps I theorized on that brought the evil queen to achieve her ability to disguise herself and create a poisoned apple, I began to believe that maybe there were some similarities to these two women on how they achieved power beyond their comprehension. Here's what I said back in that evil queen video.
In Snow White and Easter in the Woods, we learn the evil queen not only survived her encounter with the dwarves, but is also so enraged by her defeat that she calls upon the eternal powers to destroy her castle. And in Snow White and the Green Flame, when the queen flies on a broom to the great gathering of witches, they claim she is disgraced by being halted by Snow White and her dwarves, so she faces punishment according to the laws of hell. These comics showed the evil queen submitted to a power that was beyond her own. Her magic derived from a dark place, and she was under the influence of unspeakable evil power. And a 1938 promotional brochure takes that idea one step further. In an article on the origin of Snow White's story, it states, rural superstitions have always credited the Harz Mountains with being the favorite haunt of spirits and fairies, both good and bad. In the original legend, the queen sells herself, body and soul, to the bad spirits of the mountain. Therefore, she is able to work her witcheries upon innocent people as she does in the picture. End quote.
Much like how I think Maleficent committed herself to a master, it seemed that the evil queen had done the same thing, and that they could have served the same entity. The Harz Mountains, where the evil queen went to sell her soul, was again said to be a favorite haunt of spirits and fairies. While Maleficent is sometimes referenced to be both a witch or a sorceress, these phrases are more labels for the evil mistress rather than a description of what she truly is, because she has been confirmed to be an evil fairy. As we are told in Kingdom Hearts 3D, Xehanort refers to Maleficent as the Dark Fairy, which means Maleficent would have been drawn to the Harz Mountains. And guess where Maleficent commonly resides? Maleficent lives within a decrepit castle on top of a mountain range. Maleficent watched over the land on the range known as the Forbidden Mountains, where her wrath and frustration thundered throughout the lands. She hid from the world in one of the gloomiest and darkest places, and I think these mountains were the Harz Mountains. While the Harz Mountains are an actual mountain range on Earth, since I would like to believe that Sleeping Beauty's story and Snow White's story occur in the same world, then that means the Harz Mountains would be accessible to Maleficent, especially since we never actually saw the Harz Mountains in Snow White's tale. They could have just been called the Forbidden Mountains at that time. I think Maleficent lived atop of the same mountain range where the evil queen sold her soul, which leads me to believe that Maleficent likely spoke the same pledge as the evil queen.
The evil queen seems to have given her existence away to terrible entities to secure short-term power and influence with her magic. The brochure article continues by stating, translated from famous folklore, the rhymed invocation uttered by a suppliant to the evil spirits runs as follows. If I had to keep my vow that I take and swear to now, may the vultures, wolf and bear, on my body feed and tear, mock my agony and groans, rend the red flesh from my bones, where the dark pine branches wave, be this wilderness my grave. End quote. I hope that by reading this I have not legitimately pledged myself to evil. I think I'll be fine.
The evil queen pledged her soul to a terrible force at the Harz Mountains, and I believe Maleficent spoke those same words and conducted the same ritual there. Since the evil queen and Maleficent both went to the same place for an extension of their power, it seemed clear that Maleficent would have been obedient to the same master.
In my search for the correct evil spirit, I felt there had to be some significance the evil queen pledged her life at the Harz Mountains. And when I thought about dark stories centered around a mountain, suddenly everything clicked. There is one story that sticks out in my mind Walt Disney himself told about evil spirits on a mountain. The tale in Fantasia titled The Night on Bald Mountain, featuring the darkest entity Walt Disney ever created, Chernobog. In this Fantasia story, if you are unfamiliar with it, Chernobog, the black god, based off of the god of the night in Slavic mythology, rises out of Bald Mountain and casts a shadow over the town below, summoning the dead to burn in flames and dance for his own pleasure until the sounds of bells and the light of day draws him back into the mountain.
In my opinion, if Maleficent is going to give herself to another, she should give herself to what Walt Disney called the devil himself. The black god represented pure evil, and was seen as one of the most raw representations of evil that has ever been depicted in animation. Chernobog was originally created with no pursuit of any discernible goal, other than generally wreaking havoc and instilling tyranny on all. The demon Chernobog, I think, would be the perfect master for Maleficent, and if she lived on the Heart's Mountains and took part in the same ritual that the evil queen had, then it seems likely that he was the entity she received the powers of hell from.
It turns out the night at Bald Mountain is meant to be a representation of Walpurgis Night, otherwise known as the Witches' Sabbath. On the Witches' Night, Christians prayed to God for the intercession of Saint Walpurga, for he was hailed by the Christians of Germany for battling pest, rabies, whooping cough, as well as against witchcraft. They prayed and lit bonfires to ward off spirits on this night, specifically because it was believed to be the night of a witches' meeting. A meeting said to take place on the Brocken, the highest point in the Harz Mountains. The same mountains where the evil queen was said to have pledged her allegiance to an evil source of magic. This means Chernobog was likely the god the evil queen gave her soul to.
Chernobog was said to have come from the mountains that I believe Maleficent devoted herself to a master. This makes me believe that the black god is the one who empowered the dark fairy. This is further supported by Maleficent's cursing of Aurora appearing to summon or channel the demons and spirits that Chernobog had on his night at Bald Mountain. Maleficent also leads a simple-minded race of goons that roared, served, and danced around fire during celebrations like Chernobog's, which might indicate that she was granted them. The fairy commonly used and manipulated the element of fire as Chernobog did. She even possessed the same snake-like yellow eyes, and could only be held back by good unifying together. But why did Maleficent become more powerful than the evil queen if they both dedicated themselves to Chernobog? I believe the reason Maleficent had stronger magic than the evil queen was because as a fairy who already had magic, the dark powers of hell extended her abilities even farther than any typical fairy. While the evil queen's magic was extended beyond any normal human, this explains why Maleficent became so strong and why she was feared by so many. Her magic was extended beyond almost all others in her land. I can't express enough how Maleficent likely serving Chernobog is just extremely satisfying to me because as I grew up, there were lots of crossovers that insinuated there was a connection between Maleficent and Chernobog in some way. He gives her recognition and praises when she's accomplished in The House of Mouse. In the Ridley Pearson books titled Kingdom Keepers, he leads the Disney villains as a ruthless, raw, and powerful force, with Maleficent conducting most of the plans. And in the Walt Disney World and Disneyland nighttime show Fantasmic, the evil queen summons both Maleficent and Chernobog to help destroy Mickey's imagination. From everything I had seen, Maleficent obeyed or worked with Chernobog, and now I think I understand their connection. I think Maleficent had to be calling upon a force more powerful than herself while she tormented Aurora's kingdom, which I believe means she dedicated herself to a master. Since she was a fairy, I think Maleficent was attracted to the Heart's Mountains, and with a desire for power, pledged her soul to the forces of evil, which meant she gave up herself to the black god Chernobog. With goons at her disposal, dark magic bestowed to her, and the ability to summon more power, Maleficent became an evil force that could curse kingdoms and transform herself into horrible creatures. I believe that by Maleficent giving herself to Chernobog, he transformed the Dark Fairy into the mistress of all evil. But now it's time to hear your thoughts. What do you think of Chernobog being Maleficent's master? And do you think the evil queen serves the black god as well? Let me know what you think in the comments, along with any other ideas you have for future videos. To see more theory videos, you can find a link to those videos in the description, which includes my video on where the evil queen got her magic. While you're down in the description, also be sure to check out my new podcast, Following Dreams, and if you'd like to continue to see more magical discussions like this one, then don't forget to click that subscribe button and the beautiful bell if you're new. Thank you to my wonderful patrons over on Patreon who are amazing supporters of my videos, and as always, Thanks for watching, and have a magical day.